Indian agriculture scene has undergone sea change in the last 2 decades. The food production has increased from mere 50 million tons at the dawn of independence to about 150 million tons now. How this change came about is a fascinating story. And who can tell this story better than Dr. Swaminathan, who has been responsible for shaping up India's agriculture development policy and steering it through. Dr. Swaminathan, can you tell me what major factors were responsible for bringing about green revolution in this country?
Well, I would think there are three groups of factors. You must remember that when we became independent, we were born with the Bengal famine, where over 2 million people died out of hunger as a backdrop. And therefore, our first Prime Minister, Shri Jawaharlal Nehru, said that everything else can wait but not agriculture. If agriculture goes wrong, nothing else will go right. First, therefore, was a political priority to food and agriculture research, extension and development, because that is extremely important in terms of land reform, in terms of rural infrastructure. The community development project was largely started with the intention of improving rural roads, rural education, rural health care. Now, this whole series of public investment decisions, political decisions, were exceedingly important. Above all, Jawaharlal Nehru was convinced that without science and technology, the transformation of either agriculture or industry will not be possible. Hence, there was a growing investment in agricultural research. The Indian Council of Agricultural Research was revitalized. But in spite of all these, at the end of the 50s, we found that we were in still great difficulty as far as the possibility of meeting the food needs of a growing population was concerned, because we must also recall that after independence, the average lifespan of an Indian child, woman and man started going up, largely due thanks to progress in preventive and curative medicine. And our population growth started outstripping our food production growth rate. And there were a series of reports towards the end of the 50s on India's food crisis and methods of meeting it. And then was born the Intensive Agricultural District Program, called the IADP program, which was essentially designed to get the best out of water wherever there was irrigation facility. And we started making large investments on irrigation right from the time of our independence. We thought that by growing better varieties, applying more fertilizer and better crop management, we can get the best out of water.
The technology became knowledge intensive. A number of fundamental changes in cultural practice should be brought out. The timing of irrigation, the method of sowing, the seed rate, spacing, and the time of harvesting must be taken care of, because high-yielding varieties were only a trigger to the Green Revolution.
The development of high-yielding varieties is one of the most fascinating scientific stories of our time. It's not a story, it's a real story. It's a real fact what happened. In the case of wheat and rice, our major breakthrough came with the introduction of what are called the genes for dwarfing, or reducing the height of the plant without reducing the capacity of the wheat or rice plant to yield well. I'm mentioning this because in the Mohenjo-daro excavations, it was found that we were cultivating in 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, particularly in areas of northwest India and in Dera Ghazi Khan district of Punjab, which is now in Pakistan. In those areas, we were cultivating a wheat which is called Indian dwarf wheat in literature, or Triticum spherococcum, as it is called botanically, largely because it had spherical grains, round grains, and so it is called spherococcum. Unfortunately, this Indian dwarf wheat, or the Mohenjo-daro wheat as it is called, had a short plant, but it also had a very short head, or panicle as it is called. In other words, then its yield potential was low.
Our yield was not good because irrigation was required for high yields, but taller plants fell down after irrigation, which was necessary in high temperatures. Hence, farmers did not irrigate. So, a change in the architecture of wheat was felt necessary. This resulted in dwarf varieties by crossing and mutation of already existing material. At the same time, Dr. Norman Borlaug of Mexico had developed a new short-strawed variety with a very high yield. So, the Government of India requested Dr. Norman Borlaug to send those seeds from Mexico.
He was kind enough to supply us with a wide range of material containing the Northern dwarfing genes in 1963. The moment the varieties, the material was obtained, we started a 5-pronged strategy in order to get the kinds of varieties our farmers will like. One was straight plant introduction. It is one of the oldest methods of introducing plants from one country to the other. They have gone on for a long period of time. Many of our own varieties, a variety like, for example, GEB24, developed by Dr. K. Ramaya in Coimbatore in the early 20s, the rice variety was grown in Nigeria under the name Niger Zale by so many names in different countries. So we started looking for, in the Mexican material, strains which can be directly introduced into India. We found 2 of them, Lerma Rojo 64A and Sonora 64. They were doing well under our own conditions, giving 4 to 5 tons or even 6 tons sometimes, where our variety is giving only 2 tons. Then we started selecting from the segregating populations sent by Dr. Borlaug, what we call the advanced generation material. From there we selected 2 varieties, Kalyan Sona and Sonalika, which did very well. They were both segregating for rust resistance, brown rust resistance. We identified those lines which were resistant under our conditions and started multiplying the seeds. Then we started crossing the varieties imported from Mexico with our own varieties, and we have now over 150 varieties developed by this hybridization program. Then we started subjecting them to mutation breeding, changing the color of the grain. And finally we started also transferring the dwarfing gene to the Malvi wheats grown in Indore, in the Malwa plateau, what is technically called Triticum durum. These wheats have only 28 chromosomes, unlike the bread wheats or Triticum aestivum, which have 42 chromosomes. And we started developing dwarf varieties of durum wheats for the black soil areas of central India. This 5-pronged strategy, which were initiated right in the year when we got this material from Mexico, certainly has paid us great dividends. We could have a wide spectrum of varieties which combine the chapati making quality, which combine the kind of rust resistance which we needed, and which combine the maturity period, the duration which our farmers wanted in different parts of the country. And as you can see, 1968 was the first year of the wheat revolution, when Indira Gandhi released a special stamp called the Wheat Revolution Stamp. And she instructed the Postal Department to put the library, the clock tower of the Indian Agricultural Research Institute on the stamp with a histogram showing the previous best yield in wheat was 11.8 tons or so, nearly 12 million tons, and we reached 17 million tons. The 5 million ton jump was a quantum jump. That is why it was called by an American scientist as a green revolution.
Dr. Swaminathan, you mentioned that high-yielding dwarf varieties were primarily responsible for the green revolution. In what way do you think our own agricultural scientists contributed to bringing about green revolution in this country?
Well, a favorite pastime in our country is to belittle our own achievements. And as I said earlier, the plant exchange has happened historically. In fact, rice plant, one of its major centers of origin is in India, in the Jaipur tract of Orissa. And from here it has gone everywhere. As I said earlier, the Japanese identified a dwarfing gene which proved to have a number of useful characters. It did not reduce the height of the panicle. Similarly, the Chinese identified a dwarfing gene called DG dwarfing gene, and this dwarfing gene was taken to Taiwan, which resulted in a variety called Taichung Native 1, released by the Joint Commission on Rural Reconstruction of Taiwan in 1956. Now, scientific literature, when we came to know of the dwarfing gene, we came purely from scientific journals. The agronomy journal where I first read about it. And that is how one writes to others, gets seeds. But there are many other countries who also got the seeds even before we got, and they have not achieved what we have been able to do. Therefore, getting seeds is everywhere. People exchange seeds all the time. I don't want to take the time now to show how many of our own varieties of cotton, of our own varieties of rice, and our own varieties of wheat. In fact, many of the US varieties before the dwarf varieties came, they had some of our wheats like NP4, the new POSA 4 in their blood. The Indian wheats were highly priced. They received prizes in Australia and United States and Canada for their quality. So the plant introduction and exchange historically has been a very important scientific method. It is not a question of ad hoc introductions. You had to do it. But let me also say, having a variety alone will not give you yield. In fact, our varieties earlier, the tall varieties were usually dwarf in farmers' fields. They were what I call nutritional dwarfs. Right. There was not enough nutrition, so they could not grow up. In fact, yield is a product of interaction between the genetic potential of the plant and the management efficiency of the farmer. Unless these two interact in a positive way, we won't get yield. So I would say, those who say that something came from somewhere, this does not in any way to underrate the significance of the very valuable role provided by the material which came from outside, either from Mexico. Erie itself got it only from China. You can say Erie's varieties are all Chinese varieties, and Chinese varieties came from originally from Indo in this region. Therefore, you can go on tracing back each variety to some of the pedigrees are very complicated. So international cooperation has played a key role, but for the fact that the entire design, we sought for the material. It didn't land in our laps. We sought a particular kind of material and went to the place from where we got it. And a lot of scientific analysis went into the whole planning of this. And I would say that the ultimate glories of the Indian farmer, particularly the Punjabi farmer, who made the revolution possible.
Increase in yield depends on a variety of factors. Of course, the genetic material plays a very important role. But apart from plant breeders, in what way other agricultural scientists have contributed to bringing about green revolution?
Well, every discipline has played a major role. Agronomists try to develop the cultural practices where the plant can give its best. Water management specialists identified the optimum method of water management. The soil chemists identified in many cases that small deficiencies of zinc or micronutrients or phosphorus can completely reduce the yield. And the post-harvest technologists looked into the whole area of threshing, harvesting, the agricultural engineers. But I mentioned earlier 3 groups of activities. One is technology, the other the services like seed production, the seed technologists, method of seed multiplication, the new breeder seed, the foundation seed, and the grower seed and so on. That is exceedingly important. And also the kinds of fertilizer formulations which are ideal for different soil combinations. Fortunately, in the case of wheat, we don't have a great problem of pests, but in rice, pest problem is serious. Therefore, the integrated pest management techniques, combining biological methods of control, genetic methods of control, cultural methods of control, and chemical methods of control in an optimum combination. The entomologists and plant pathologists played a major role in the development of integrated pest management strategies. But then in the case of services, it was also important to identify the credit needs. So economists had to play a part in terms of what are the credit requirements for different levels of investment in inputs. And above all, the public policy research in terms of what kind of pricing, the Agricultural Prices Commission was also a whole group of economists who were trying to identify the production costs and the cost the consumer can afford. They had to recommend to government prices which are remunerative to the farmer and reasonable to the consumer. So you had a whole series of social scientists, apart from biological scientists and physical scientists, who are important.
There is a great need to be aware of gene erosion due to monoculture. Different farmers of an area can choose different varieties suited to their requirement and avoid disasters.
Home science colleges played a very critical role in trying to identify the nutritive value of new varieties, developing new methods of chapati making, new methods of bread making, and new methods of cooking rice and so on. So whether they are home scientists, whether social scientists, economists. So only when a package of technology was married with optimum package of services and government policies in input-output pricing, in land reform, agrarian reform, fixity of tenure, then only the production goes up.
It is alleged that because of the use of heavy doses of fertilizers and other chemicals such as insecticides and weedicides, there is a great deal of environmental pollution. How can science and technology contribute to bringing about ecological balance? On one hand, we certainly need higher yields. On the other, we need ecological balance. Would you like to say something about this?
Well, as you said, inputs are needed for output because a plant is not a magician. It requires nutrition to produce more. For example, if you want to get 5 tons of wheat, we have to give the wheat plant over 100 kilograms of nitrogen. But today, if you use anything in excess, it causes a problem, particularly pesticides and also fertilizers. They can cause water pollution downstream. That is why the scientists recommend practices like integrated pest management, only need-based application of pesticides, and the building up of the natural enemies of pests in the population. Similarly, integrated nutrient supply systems in which green manure crops, biofertilizers, organic recycling, and chemical manures, they are all combined in a desirable formulation. In other words, then, there is an opportunity to produce more and more without an ecological harm, provided we could use all this with a good deal of knowledge. Ecologically sound technologies are knowledge intensive, but the greatest handicap I find in our country in adopting techniques like integrated pest management, scientific water management, or integrated nutrient supply, or improved post-harvest technology is the very small size of farms. Nearly 90 million of about 100 million operational holdings in our country are below the size of 1 hectare, between 2 and 1 hectare and below, that is small and marginal farmers categories.
You said that the majority of the farm families in this country have a very small size of holding. Some of the economists criticize Green Revolution that it is helping widen the gap between the large and small farmers. Do you agree with this allegation?
If you have got a large industrial house, they become larger and larger. All the big people always, if you have got more money, you make more money. It's called the compound interest law. If you have got a small farm, you'll have less income. If you have got a large farm, you'll have large income. It doesn't need an economist to mention this. I think the real difficulty is they have not understood at all. Many of them, I don't say all, it is very wrong too. Some of them have just looking for methods of, I think what they have not understood is the role of different elements in development. One is science and technology. Science and technology can only produce material, develop methods, indicate strategies for increasing production. But as I said earlier, technological package is only one component of the requirements for agricultural progress. The public policy package, in a country predominantly of small farmers, we must make a distinction between a small farm and a small farmer. A small farm is ideal for intensive agriculture, for the adoption of high yield technologies. In fact, there is no other hope for the small farm except through vertical improvement in productivity. But a small farmer is an euphemism for a family who has no access to credit, who cannot take risk, who cannot make investment. The answer here, science is not a magic wand to make a small farmer rich overnight. The answer is strictly in the hands of the same economists who make the criticism, who should really direct their suggestion towards the policy maker, the political leaders, who have to make the decisions on how far they're going to help the small farmer. Well, our average yields always prove to be lower, except in horticultural crops like grapes. We have the highest average yield in the world. The reasons are several. First, the comparison is with largely irrigated area. China has practically all irrigated area. 95% of their cultivated area is irrigated, while ours only about 40% are irrigated. And we are very much dependent upon our monsoon. Same is the Nile Valley in Egypt. It's a completely 100% irrigated agriculture with long days. But when you take our own irrigated areas like Ludhiana district and so on, nearly 5 tons of wheat and 5 tons of rice, 10 tons per, one of the highest in the world. So one has to disaggregate, but we have a number of structural problems. Our irrigation in black soils has led to salinization, alkalinity, waterlogging, a number of subsidiary problems. The very small resource poor farmers struggle because of high risks involved. There is no proper crop insurance. And our agricultural research system is, although big, it is not very large in terms of our population or the variety of crops and variety of farm animals we have to handle. In fact, I would say our investment in agricultural research is one of the lowest in the world, even in the developing world. In our own country, hardly 10% of research funds go to agriculture. Atomic energy, space research, and so on take the lion's share. It has always been so. Agriculture has been a stepchild for a long time. Therefore, to say that there's a large investment in agricultural research is not correct. If you put it in terms of per hectare or per farmer, when over 100 million farming families have to be helped, the amount of investment we are making in science and technology in relation to agriculture is very poor. This is one of the great dangers this country is going to face in the coming years.
Well, that brings me to the last question. By the turn of this century, India's population will touch about 1 billion mark. As head of the Research and Education Group for formulation of 8 5-year plan, what strategies have you suggested to feed the growing population?
Well, it's a very important question. This challenge is very great, and I entirely agree. Our population is growing. Not only the human and animal population will have to feed over 100 crores of people and 50 crores of farm animals in another 11 years by the end of this century from less land, because land is all the time going out of agriculture and the biotic and abiotic stresses are increasing. Now, therefore, what we have recommended is a considerable technological upgrading of agriculture in 7 major science and technology zones of the country. The first are the green revolution areas. In other words, it is not only Punjab or Western UP and Haryana, but it is Godavari district, Tanjavur district, Kuttanad area of Kerala, and so on. Every part of the country has an area which you can call green revolution area. In other words, the areas where production advance is largely through productivity improvement, not through area expansion. The green revolution areas require now higher levels of technology to take them to the next higher yield level. For example, in China, they have gone to hybrid rice. Over 10 million hectares out of 32 million hectares under rice are under hybrid rice. This requires the introduction of new technologies. Also, we need maintenance research to defend the gains already made. Even to stand where we are is a problem. The other area is the green but no green revolution areas. This is a very large chunk of our country, the whole of eastern India, eastern Uttar Pradesh, the whole of North Bihar, West Bengal, Assam, parts of Orissa, parts of Madhya Pradesh, the eastern parts of Madhya Pradesh. Their water is not a constraint. They have adequate water. In fact, excess water is a problem, but water management is a constraint. Our next major effort has to be in what I call the green but no green revolution areas. That is, water is there. The third is a very large dry farming zone, the semi-arid areas, which have to be introduced with new technologies and integrated technology of water saving and water sharing, soil management, and so on. Then the arid land, whether the hot desert of Rajasthan or the cold desert of Ladakh and Leh, they provide extraordinary opportunities in terms of arid land horticulture. In fact, the Rajasthan Canal area can be the Nile Valley of India if we really want it, but today it is getting silted up, it is getting alkalinized, and so on. But science and technology could help the Rajasthan Canal to become the Nile Valley of India, same as Egypt's high yields. We can produce high quality seeds because the arid areas, very good quality of wool, of sheep, of animals, animal husbandry, and horticulture, and so on. Then we have the mountain ecosystem, whether they are Himalayas, or the Western Ghats, or the Eastern Ghats, the Aravalis, and so on. They have provided enormous opportunity of different kind in terms of horticulture, silviculture. One of our greatest blessings is the last vast coastal area, over 8,000 kilometers of coastal area. Even leaving apart the exclusive economic zone of 200 kilometers, if we take the coastal area management as 20 kilometers of land surface and 20 kilometers of sea surface, on the sea surface side we can introduce high-tech aquaculture, culture fisheries, and high-tech capture fisheries, capture and culture fisheries, brackish water fish farming. And on the land side, enormous opportunities for growing agroforestry, palmyra, casuarina, cashew nut, coconut, and a wide variety of trees, combined with fodder plants, animal husbandry. In the coastal areas, we can grow high quality of seeds and fruits and vegetables, specifically for export purposes. We can have animal husbandry purely for export, largely because the transportation cost will be lower. We have never given enough adequate integrated thought to the whole coastal resource management in agriculture and aquaculture. And to cap it all, we have the island ecosystems, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and a whole series of Lakshadweep Islands, which provide their own opportunities for outstanding forestries, outstanding fish culture, and so on. So what we have really suggested in our working group for the 8th plan on agricultural research and education is a considerable effort in the technological upgrading of agriculture. Our agriculture has to integrate the best in modern science and technology on the basis of ecological zones, getting the maximum yield from the environmental potential of an area, without at the same time endangering the long-term productivity, whether aquatic productivity or terrestrial productivity. Because it's important we think not only of today, but of tomorrow. This is why we say agriculture should not only be profitable, but should be ecologically sustainable over time. Our children, grandchildren, and their children will have to be sustained from the same plot of land or less land. So we are entering an era of a highly complex agricultural age, and the only way we can handle the new problems will be to get the best in science and technology, marry them with the best in the management technology which our farmers are capable of, and support them with adequate services and adequate public policy support.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Swaminathan, for sharing this story with us. Thank you.